I listened carefully to the statement made by the Republican minority leader about deficits, and I think it's worthy of note that history suggests an opposite conclusion from what he just said. Remember this: the last time the federal government ever balanced its budget and generated a surplus was in the closing years of the presidency of William Jefferson Clinton, a Democrat. When President Clinton left office, the national debt accumulated over the history of the United States of America was $5 trillion. Clinton left office, handed the keys to President George W. Bush, and said, incidentally, next year, welcome to Washington, another surplus. $120 billion surplus. The economy has created 23 million jobs in my 8 years, and I wish you the best. He left, turned the keys over to President George W. Bush, and gave him control for 8 years. 8 years later, another snapshot. The national debt was no longer $5 trillion, it was $11 trillion, more than doubled under President George W. Bush. We had lost jobs, dramatically lost jobs in America, unlike President Clinton. And when George W. Bush handed the keys over to President Barack Obama and said, welcome to Washington, incidentally, next year's budget deficit is $1.2 trillion. Quite a different story, isn't it? You wouldn't know that from the speech just given. The suggestion is that Democrats just don't get it right when it comes to deficits, but Republicans do. History tells us otherwise. So President Barack Obama inherited one of the weakest economies since the Great Depression. In fact, we were teetering on another depression. The month that he took the oath of office, putting his hand on Abraham Lincoln's Bible, we lost over 750,000 jobs in America. That is what President Obama inherited. We didn't hear that from the Republican minority leader. Mr. President, I want to show one chart that tells the story, tells it graphically, and it's a chart which those who follow the floor debates will see over and over again. The red reflects job losses during President George W. Bush. The blue lines reflect employment under President Obama. This was the month that President Obama was sworn into office. Almost 800 million jobs were lost in America. That's what he saw as he came to the presidency. And then look what happened. The job losses started reducing and finally turned the corner on the positive side. There you have a graphic presentation of two views of the economy. The views of the Republicans and George W. Bush with all of this job loss, and the views of President Obama. And that, Mr. President, is the debate we're currently engaged in. The Republicans want us to return to these policies. Policies which call for tax breaks and cuts for the wealthiest in America, and basically ignore investments we need to put people back to work. I served on the Bowles-Simpson Deficit Commission. I understand this issue a little bit, maybe more than some. I don't profess to be an expert. The deficits have to be brought under control. You can't borrow 40 cents for every dollar you spend in Washington and sustain economic growth in America, period. But I also know this: with 10, 11, or 12 million Americans out of work, you cannot balance this budget. We have got to get America back to work. These workers have to start earning a good wage, paying their fair share of taxes, and creating growth in this economy, and also growth in revenue, which allows us to balance our budget. The president has two accelerators. He has to push on them both at the same time. Fiscal responsibility on one side, economic growth on the other, and we have to move forward in a straight path. That's what his budget does. There are those who say, ignore economic growth, ignore creating jobs, just cut spending, just cut the deficit. If you did that alone, I'm afraid the result would be disastrous. The President understands, and we all should. There are three basic pillars to economic growth in America, and they're obvious. Training and education. Is there a single senator, congressman, or anyone here who doesn't understand they wouldn't be here without an education? We value education in America. It's the ladder of opportunity. And President Obama, in his budget, focuses on educating and training the next generation of skilled workers and leaders in the American economy. When we walk away from that commitment to education, we walk away from our future. The second thing the President's budget focuses on is innovation. Finding those new technologies, those new discoveries, which make our lives less burdensome and create more economic opportunity. It may be the next medical device, a diagnostic tool which saves a life. It may be the next pharmaceutical breakthrough at the National Institutes of Health. It may be a new process for developing clean energy in America that puts us back in the race to be the world leader in that field. Those investments by our federal government pay off in good businesses, good jobs, and a better life for all of us. Education, innovation. And the third piece is one that's on the floor today. Infrastructure. It's kind of a sterile word, but what it gets down to is it represents the highways, the bridges, the airports, the mass transit, the ports of America that are literally the arteries through which our economic blood will flow. And when they are not as good as they should be, as efficient as they should be, our economy struggles.